Ready when you are, Stan.
Good to go. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It's work session of the Seldovia City Council, Monday, April 29th, 2024. Time is 4:04 p.m. This is a budget work session, and we have a couple topics tonight. FY25 draft fee schedule, the FY25 senior meals, water and sewer rates discussion, and then the American Rescue Plan and community assistance programming funding. Those are the four items tonight. And then we'll go and start off with the FY20 fee schedule. And Heidi, if you want to take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I know we have a lot to cover, and I'm going to just try to kind of quickly move through at least the draft fee schedule. It's pretty standard. I did share on my screen here just so we can see it, since I know you all haven't had a chance to review it. The major updates. And some language changes that just, as we've worked through it in the years, it makes more sense. For instance, under Harbor fees, you'll see $10 used to included with mortgage instead of to free with mortgage. Some changing stall rentals to the word mortgage so that we're consistent. And then just quickly move through it. If you guys have any questions, the 1.7% increase for Harbor rates monthly, 6-month and annual. We did not implement that for daily since we're still pretty high for the majority of our communities on the state. Waitlist fee, we did decrease that one to $25. We found that $40 was really a kind of a hindrance, and $25 seems to be that sweet spot where people can feel comfortable listing themselves under the waitlist fee, and then as space comes available, moving into a mortgage spot. And we changed the language for annual reserved bill out from March 1st to end of February, because really we do bill the last day of February. And that's what our statements say. Stall rates was changed to non-daily mortgage customers for electricity. We removed credit card fees due to the fact that that wasn't able to be implemented. Admin fees remain the same for Harbor. City dock fees remain the same. Boat storage yard has a little bit of additional information that concurs with our mortgage and not mortgage, our haul out and storage yard agreement that was just updated. We had that legally reviewed and reviewed by our insurance to make sure we were consistent. So we updated language to make sure all the documents talk to each other. And same with storage yard. We did implement a 1.7% increase or so far, and that's what shows in the draft. None of the blocking changed. Equipment stays the same. I know I'm going through this quickly, so you guys stop me if you have any specific questions. Harbor garbage stays the same. We did put a line in there about the harbor shed garbage is included with annual mortgage and is specific to garbage from and related to vessel mortgage. Household garbage or non-vessel garbage is to be paid at the harbor master's office. City facilities remains the same. Our city facility rentals. RV camping, we did address camping so that the total fee would be a whole dollar amount as long as it's in the summer. We'll make sure that we plan on closing the RV park and outside beach for camping prior to October 1st or at October 1st, because then we switch over into our winter rates. But for summer, April 1st to September 30th, it's $13.70 plus sales tax at 9.5% for an RV. That's $15 total. So we're not doing this pay box $15 and change for the sales tax. And then tents are $9.14 plus sales tax at 9.5%. So it's $10 total. We would like to do that with some of our other rates, like our boat launch rates, as we can figure that out moving forward. But with the seasonal split, it's just a little bit more work, and we haven't had time to process that. We took out fax because we no longer fax from the city office. Our line just hasn't worked in a very long time, and ACS says it's Xerox, and Xerox says it's ACS, and ATS says they need to talk to each other, and just is not something that we've had capabilities. So, and it really hasn't been much of a hindrance. Firewood permit, we added language that it's for city land, dead and down trees only. Pending permits for 120 days instead of 90. We put back in background check, fingerprinting, and serving papers. Those were removed with the implementation of the VPSO program, but then in speaking with them, they said, hey, wait, we can still do those things for you. And they have been. So the fee's back in there. They collect that for us. And we still receive a little bit of revenue for those services. Water and sewer rates, I won't dive too much into because we're going to talk about them in a little bit. This just shows a 1.7% increase. However, we will be having a larger conversation in this meeting. And then for water and sewer fees, everything stays the same. We just added a little bit of language in on a couple for consistency. So any questions on the fee schedule, any language changes or things that you guys would like to see different off the bat? I know that was fast. I can go back to anything if anybody wants to look at it. Otherwise, we can move on to senior meals.
Anyone have any questions? John?
Yeah, sorry about that, but I haven't really even had a chance to look at this. I get I got a lot of questions, and it's the sales tax, and I know that you guys had an issue with the borough in the audit, and they want you to charge monthly sales tax fees. I guess I'm still trying to figure out how to wrap my head around that. It doesn't make much sense to me, and I'm wondering if the borough isn't, in my opinion, overstepping their authority by requiring that. Just as an example, if I choose to pay
if I may interrupt, this is Vivian. John is cutting out. He's kind of garbly and I can't hear him.
Yeah, okay, is that better, Vivian?
That's better. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So what I'm getting at is it's done everywhere else. And I don't understand why that they're making you jump through all the hoops. I mean, if we talk to anybody else about that, you know, I just don't agree with the purpose decision there. Like I said, you know, I pay my car insurance semi-annually. If I paid it monthly, it'd be $120 more per policy. And I know there's folks in the community, as you and I have this conversation, they would prefer to pay their bridge fees annually. And then there's others that would like to have the option to pay it monthly or whatever, you know, quarterly. So I'm just wondering, was it AML or somebody, is there anybody else that we could talk to find out? I think they're overstepping their bounds. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Heidi.
From speaking with the borough, my understanding is it's a rental rate, just like a house rental rate. It's a stall rental rate, it's a rental rate that has a monthly, and it's specific to their code. And I mean, it is in the code, and I can bring up that language that it's a 30-day rental rate. It's
in your ordinance codes?
Not ours, but in the Kenai Peninsula boroughs. So I can pull it up and I can make some more calls.
Curious. I just don't want to lay down and let them.
Well, I can shed a little light on that too.
Yeah.
This is so you weren't here, but I mean, there's been a number of times over the years that the borough's done. They've done this on the way hotel rooms are paid for, charters are paid for. So where they you guys one person pays for the whole wax, and you make basically.
Again, this council member, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
We must have something. I don't know if anybody else online is having issues, but is it bubble? It's like sounds like you're talking in the water.
Yeah.
Or is that issue?
Yeah, I was wondering if it was me or them, but it must be them, because I hear
Yeah.
it too.
Oh, yeah, it must be
Same.
something on our end.
So
Yeah.
you guys don't
We're-
think there's another way
we're
around it?
Hearing, yeah, we're not hearing what you're saying or a few words and then it goes garbly underwater.
We try a different, like, maybe,
I don't know if it'd be.
I don't think it's your mic. I think it's all of you. Heidi did it in the beginning too.
Yep, yep. So there's something wrong with tonight's connection or something.
No, just.
okay. Is that any better, Vivian?
Oh, I think right now you're fine, John, but I think it's
Okay.
overall there's something wrong with the
Okay.
system.
Anyway, I'm just questioning that, and I'm not asking you to, if you got, that's what I'm asking you. I'm just trying to get more history. It doesn't make sense to me. You know, Alaska, I pay my car insurance, and if I want to pay it monthly, it's this much, and if I pay it quarterly, it's this much, and if I pay it annually, it's cheaper.
Yeah, that's,
Why is it different for car insurance than it is anything else?
yeah, again, that's just, I mean, that's just the borough's way of being able to maximize, you know, they can get from the state.
I get that.
Nothing's up against the cap.
But it plainly states. Right. Yeah, so that's the way I see it.
That's our language. Borough's language is going to trump that. So,
Right, and they have it's a 30-day service. It's the way they're looking at that is the service is for 30 days and that's the maximum, like you would any rental. But that doesn't mean we can't look into it further. So
Well,
we can do that.
yeah,
I think
just,
Jan had a comment too.
I was just gonna say, I do have the borough code language available here if you're interested.
okay. I mean, even if you send it to me, I just don't want to roll over on it. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, how's it good for one and not the other? So,
So it's, Kenai Peninsula Borough Code, it's, 518-100. Says that it shall be applied only to the first $500 of each separate sale, rent, or service transaction, except if otherwise provided in the section B. And then the section B is the payment of rent, whether for real or personal property in excess of $500 and for more than 1 month shall be treated as several separate transactions covering the rental or lease for 1 month each. And so that's the reason it's being charged the way it is.
okay. Doesn't make me happy with it, but I guess that's what it is.
Yep. Yep.
That's why I come to your office so many times, is because I can ask you those. at
What
the
else you got,
office.
John? Any other questions?
Do you have any idea on the fee increases for this fee schedule? Have you made any calculations as to the estimated total increase for all the fee increases across the board? What type of revenue numbers you'd expect to see with the increases?
Yes. So I don't have a total number for you off the top of my head. I apologize. We're going to talk about that next week at the May 7th meeting, but each fund has an increase based on the 1.7% increase.
Right. So that's,
Talked about.
I'm just wondering what that total amount would be
Mhm.
versus, for example, the remote sales tax that continues to increase, that we haven't really talked about, you know, what our plan is for those funds and where we're going to allocate them. And I'm just wondering if, rather than putting more fees on the locals, if we can't look at some of those, no.
So with the 1.7% increase in here, that's gonna affect harbor, boat haul, water and sewer. Those are enterprise funds that should be self-sustaining, and the remote sales tax actually doesn't impact those funds because those are gonna be for sales tax for goods that are received in the community, not water, sewer, boat haul and dock. But we will be having some discussion on different ideas for water and sewer, and we
Okay.
can look at
Yeah,
different
yeah.
avenues.
No, I don't have an issue with the water and sewer at all. I understand that. Okay,
Yeah.
that's all. I
Right
have.
now, it all goes to the general fund and it's included as sales tax.
Okay, anyone else? Any follow-up questions regarding the first first section of this for the FY 25 draft fee schedule? Okay,
I'll present this again on the May 7th work session. That should hopefully be the final budget work session unless there's a lot of unanswered questions and then we'll try to squeeze another one in. So if you have any questions in the meantime that come up, just let me know, email me, come and see me, or bring it to the May 7th. And I'll bring this back just the way it is, because I know it's a quick turnaround. Is the,
Is that any better? Vivian, there's a,
It's better. You're still garbly every now and then, but it's better.
okay. Thank you.
might be our bandwidth or something here today.
Could be. So, and it was also, I was screen sharing and I was on the Zoom meeting and Liz was, so we closed out our meetings. So hopefully that doesn't give any feedback with that. So I'm not going to screen share for this next part, the senior meals proposal. So hopefully you guys can turn to page 20 and look at that with me. Senior meals. I know I've mentioned this a few times that we're a little bit short in funds this year, especially with the $4,000 decrease from our state funding. For FY25 funding confirmed, we are looking at a total of $36,086.35. We're anticipating $5,000 in donations, $1,400 in the NSIP, and that's a 7 cents per meal that we receive. For a total of $42,486.35. There are some potential funding sources that Finance Officer Yeager has been looking at through the Homer Foundation. We've received funding through them before, and Albertsons Foundation. Our previous expenditures, just to give you an idea of where we're at, the deficit is ranged between 52 and 65,000. FY22 was a high year. There was extra funding for COVID. We were able to purchase a dishwasher. I believe we purchased the new oven that year. The previous year, we were able to do a few extra things for the program itself. With the FY25 budget, we know we have about 65% of the funding total that we need that would be anticipated to be spent at least for FY24. And have a few different scenarios to present in order to address that shortfall. We know that cutting meals to 2 days per week will not be enough to cut those costs. And we also recommend cutting allocations for the finance officer. She is allocated 5% to senior meals. So you'll see in these scenarios, it's an allocation of 2.5%, and that utilities may also need to be reduced. Keep in mind that when we do these kind of shifting and reductions, while it might help the senior meals program and lower that budget, those shifts are then transferred over to the general fund through the multipurpose building. So we're still going to pay for it. I did want to throw out there that this current discussion is only applicable for the FY25 budget, as FY26 will be a competitive grant year. So we know we need to make it through this next year with what we have, and then FY26 will be able to reapply competitively depending on who applies. Then they take that pot of money and redistribute it out through the community. So depending on what's awarded, then we may be having this discussion again. But at least for FY25, we know this is the situation that we're in. There's a few scenarios presented on page 22. Page 21 gives an overview of them. The first scenario being to remain status quo. The budget is anticipated the budget shown anticipates a minimum of for 3 meals a week using current allocations, except any maintenance and repairs, which would be allocated towards the MPB instead of senior meals. The fund would operate in a deficit of $13,474 unless additional funds are awarded to allocate to the program. One option for funding is the utilization of remaining ARPA funds to cover the remaining program costs for 1 year. I want to just throw this out here. It's kind of going to be running through the conversation or it should be in the back of your heads as we move forward through these discussions. We do have some leftover or remaining ARPA funds, about 23,000, as well as the CAP program, which is right now allocated in the general fund as a revenue replacement. And previously, over many years, we've used it to cover insurance costs and some public safety. And one payment for like a $10,000 payment for Jackloff. We do have a net effect for FY25 budget of 50, I think it was 52,000. It's on the last page. So there is a little bit of room to shift and work with funds, but that ARPA could be a good choice if you guys want to continue with the full program. Scenario 2, FY25 reduced, moves all maintenance as well as utilities to the MPB, cuts the finance officer time to 2.5% and reduces meals to twice per week. Scenario 3 is 3 times a week reduced, but also cuts. So it's like a happy medium. So 3 times cuts the finance officer time to 2.5% and removes utility. And scenario 4 is a mixed service, which would assume 2 meals per week from May 1st to September 30th. Obviously, that would be like July 1 to September 30th. And then, we would do like an April 1 to May, I think is how that would end up shifting through the fiscal year. It does say May 1 through September 30th and then October 1 through April 30th. Yep. Includes no utilities or maintenance, and the finance officer is allocated at 2.5%. Right now, we're on track to have about 7,500 in donations. The scenarios that we're discussing have it set at 5,000 in anticipation of fewer meals, equaling fewer donations. However, we did raise the requested donation amount. Hopefully, we will see a little bit more revenue than the 5,000 anticipated. And of course, in scenario 1, we would see probably a more like that 7,500 rate. So if you look at that page 22, this is going to show you those scenarios. It shows you FY23 expenses, FY24's estimated expenses, and then FY25 if we held steady. And that's scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, and scenario 4. And we'd love to have council's feedback on how you would like to see this move forward. Finance Officer Yeager, she actually put together the majority of this report. So if you have questions, sure she is out.
Mr. May, if I may. Yeah.
Yep, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah. Well, I think most importantly, the city needs to decide and the community needs to decide how important the senior meals program is to our community, first and foremost. I think every community should have the program that provides meals to those people who need it. I think it's important that we make sure we get our donations and that people contribute. I think that's important also. I would be myself, and maybe Jan, you could address this as far as the amount of meals that are being taken for 3 meals a day. What would it look like if we only did 2 meals a week? I mean, a week, sorry. 3 meals a week versus 2. Is there a good use of the program? And maybe somebody could fill us in about that. And truly, I'm lending myself towards scenario 1, and using that money that we have, because the reality is, and the other part I have to ask is, a finance officer putting her at 2.5%, is that really utilizing your time at that percentage, or are we just compensating for it? Those are real numbers. And then the other real numbers would be the maintenance and then utilities. We want to keep real numbers for our departments and for what we provide to the city or what the city provides. So I think it's important that we have realistic numbers and not change them just to make it float. So if somebody could address that, I'd appreciate that. And for those reasons, I'd be leaning towards number 1, keeping the options and using that money that we have, but also keeping the real numbers, what it costs us to run the program. So if somebody could address that, Jan, maybe you. Or anybody.
Yeah. Properly answer your question. Yeah, I would say 5% is fairly accurate in terms of what I spend on that program.
You cut out. Repeat that.
I would say that 5% is probably fairly accurate on what I spend on that program. I would say it's definitely not too high.
Okay.
It just because it is a fairly, compared to some of our other grants, the reporting process for this grant is fairly intensive. And then, of course, obviously there's some personnel management and that type of thing that I do for this one as well. In terms of meals, yeah, one of the things that we're running into that it's a good problem to have, which is that our participation is up considerably. The last few years, I'd say we've probably averaged 24 to 2,500 meals a year. And this year, I think we're going to be between 100. Participation is up. And so it's unfortunate that that's happening at the same time that our funding is getting more challenging, because I think it does show what an important program this is to the community. And I would say that as we go forward, looking toward a year of competitive funding again, if we can, as you said, tie the costs directly to the program, it does help us show the need going forward for increased funding again.
Vivian, did you have any follow-ups to Jan?
Just the other part of that would be I appreciate your answers. Thanks, Jan. The other part of that is the maintenance and the utilities. Where are we with that? Do we actually know if we go with other scenarios where we're dropping those down, then we have no realistic numbers, because we're looking at, do you have numbers for the maintenance and the utilities that we would be saying, never mind?
I don't have them off the top of my head. The maintenance is fairly variable, and it usually doesn't add up to a lot. The utilities are higher, obviously. We allocate actually a fair bit of the heat and electricity of this building to senior meals, and that is one area that Heidi and I were speaking, and we feel like we could fairly lower those allocations for utilities without skewing the cost of the program. Right now, of senior meals is probably a little bit heavily burdened for utilities.
Okay, thank you very much.
So quick follow-up. Jen, I'll get to you in just a second. So under this scenario 2, 3, and 4 right now, you've got 0 in there for heating, fuel, power, and phone, correct?
Right, so some, but not as much.
Okay, so then yeah, if you utilities, you're at a $760 back for 4,700. Let's call it 4,000. Yeah, 4,000, 4,500. You'd still be at about a $4,000 deficit if you added those back in. Then okay. Jen.
Yeah, your mics are really awful still, and it seems to cut out like right when we need to actually hear what you're saying. So just FYI on that.
Is that my mic?
I think it's everybody. I don't think it's your mics. I think it's your internet or something. Got the gist of it though. Although I'm looking at scenarios 2 and 3. Why are they different? Besides you're reducing meals, is one of them going to run in the deficit? How are 2 and 3 different?
One's 2 times a week and one's 3 times a week.
Right. So is the 3 times a week going to run in the deficit?
Yes, 3 times a week shows a deficit of $6,000, and that's with a reduction of utilities. And scenario 4 is the mixed, so we'd have 2 times a week for the and then 3 times a week for the winter, which that can be switched. We were just thinking there was more options in the summer for people for food. And then, as Vivian pointed out with ARPA funds, just keeping that in mind, on page 25, we do have $23,408 that could be utilized towards this program or towards other programs. And we can talk about that a little bit more if that helps with this discussion. But that would be if you were doing scenario 1 or any of the scenarios and you wanted to utilize those funds, you could. Otherwise, we can search for other avenues or do a full reduction.
Right. And so did I hear correctly that after this year, the grant application becomes competitive again, or whatever that means? So there's possibility to get more money after this year?
Correct. we're on a 3-year cycle. Every 3 years, the grant becomes competitive. You apply for it, and then the money is redistributed out up among the applicants that have applied. And that's kind of your standing quota for 3 years. Ours has shifted. We lost 4,000 for the coming year because of ARPA funding, because they had funding from the pandemic, and they no longer have that. So we are losing that additional assistance of 4,000. And the money's been split. They had an extra applicant this year, or 3 years ago. So the money's been split a little farther. So that's the downside. FY26 comes, there's more applicants. There's, it's being split even further.
Yeah.
We don't know. There's just no way to know if it'll be better or worse, but we do know that we're in a standstill right now. And FY26, there'll be some shifting potentially.
Right. So if we use the ARPA funds right now to cover this deficit of 13 or 14,000 or whatever, they will see that, correct? Because they're going to base the funding off of what we need or what we've used. Will they see that we had to supplement to make it? Am I thinking this through correctly?
So the ARPA funding we have, the date to expend the rest of that is by the end of December of 2024. And so, yeah, it can potentially see us through FY25, but it will not affect our funding for FY26.
I think the question is more along the lines of when we go to the competitive process, does it hurt us or help us that we have to use to show that we don't have enough funding this year? And by using that ARPA funding, what's that going to do to us? Maybe it's nothing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
what I was getting at.
I think it's very hard to say what that's going to show. I mean, we will have potentially, if we do fund this, we will have managed to cobble funding together for each one of those 3 years, hopefully, to get us through. But I think just the fact that we are pulling from different sources and they're all one-time sources, I think will show that we don't necessarily have a sustainable alternative method to that grant.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Razzie, do you still need, go ahead, Jen.
I was just gonna say, yeah, if it's not going to negatively affect funding for the senior meals in the long run, I'm in favor of doing number one and using that ARPA funding and kind of pushing this problem out to hopefully it not becoming a problem later.
Yeah. Hey, let's go ahead. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, no, I agree. I think we'll finish up here in just a second. Let's take a 5-minute break. Razzie's got to try something different here, I think, with the internet here, and then we'll come back. We may or may not lose you guys here. Give us 5 minutes here to try to fix the audio.
Okay.
Okay, test 1, 2, 3. We made a couple changes. Am I coming in broken or loud? What do you guys think?
Perfect.
Loud and clear.
Okay, hopefully that will hold then. So, okay, so we basically had some dialogue between Jen and Jan. Jen had also expressed interest in option number 1, using the ARPA funds. I have a question on the donations. Is that so? That's a combination of people coming to senior meals and leaving a donation to pay. Maybe people in the community. Is that also in kind for like food donations too, or is that just cash? Okay, so that's just cash, and that also comes. Does that take into account from like the Homer Foundation or any of that, or is that just the people paying when they come? Okay, so that's all that is then. So if we were to get anything else, that would be above and beyond then on that. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Okay. John, you got a question?
Yeah, the statement I got is as I said, I'm not in favor of losing the utilities from any of the scenarios. I think it would probably be good to sharpen our pencil if we can and make sure that they're more appropriately reflected across the board. But I think I would be in favor of number 1 there. And then maybe, in doing a little donation campaigning and maybe looking at other options to get us through the next, what is it, a year and a half?
Yeah, I know I would also be in favor of option number 1. I think it would make sense though. If you guys think senior meals is, maybe a little heavily burdened. I mean, keep it fair, but go back and maybe take a look at that and see if there's something you can do. I think it makes sense to keep that in there just so we know what our liability is. Jan, same with your time, the 5%. I don't think, I mean, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? I mean, if your 2.5 is off of there, it's going somewhere else. So, yeah, we have to, whenever we're doing budgets and jockeying money around, we have to take a good hard look at that and make sure we're being, fair and true to ourselves when we do start allocating our time, and which obviously ends up being money. So, yeah, I do like the idea of coming up, trying to look at either gaming as an option, some other more donations, some sort of, donation drive in the community, maybe, some of our, big events, music festival, 4th of July, somehow we do something to support, our senior meals program. I don't want to take away from like our fire and EMS breakfast and stuff like that, but just, there's something, I don't know. But we probably keep thinking on it, but in the short term, yeah, I think the ARPA funds makes the best scenario. Anyone else with any additional comments? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So take too much more of your time before we jump into water and sewer, but because but if I throw out there's the 23,000. And so we're potentially using almost 14, have about 9,000 left that can be implemented. What happened is the FY23 for the FY23 budget, the council utilized the funding as revenue replacement. And we did use some of it. For additional expenses in the building, for the FY22 audit expenses, we ended up actually using at 24. We had a $250 towards the annual services for the reporting for this funding. What we need to do, and this is when we were going through the audit process, is we either just start at putting these funding towards some of our regular expenses, or we have this discussion and utilize it like we are for senior meals. We have about a little bit over $9,000 left. You can put it towards new programs. You can put it towards revenue replacement for existing programs. So there's some options on here, initial establishment of the community and economic development coordinator. We're looking at probably 40,000 for that. One-time revenue replacement for water and sewer, capital improvement projects, dam inspection, repairs, dock and or BHO repairs, et cetera. That would take a little bit more vetting, and I don't know if we have time by December. Other business incentives for improving building frontage, grants, new website. I think that'd be probably excessive of what we have for funding sources. We can put more funding in towards the chamber, towards the Arts Council. I did agree to a $400 expense with the chamber for a radio ad. You could do a second radio ad for another $400. You could offer event sponsorship for some of these events, that's coming. I also wanted to touch on a one-time water and sewer revenue replacement could be used for a business incentive similar to FY20 summer incentive program. And on page 26, you'll see the language that came out of the fee schedule for the FY20 that we were not able to use because of COVID. But we did try to implement that, adding up what that would cost for a month of commercial business bills, or that we would bill out. It's about $7,500 that all the businesses that operated May 15th through September 15th, and that would mean year round, would receive a free month of service for September to just extend that a season a little longer, May 15th through September 15th. It's tricky because if we implemented it this year, maybe then it would be, May 15th. It's too hard for that line because it doesn't get implemented until July 1, but you could start it for next year for FY25, thinking ahead, and then we could have a campaign, hey, if you're wanting to extend your season, all businesses that are open May 15th through September 15th receive a month free for September for water and sewer utility. I believe we had an application and businesses had to fill that out. So it's just another idea, a way to use that additional ARPA funding. Or as said, we can start implementing it and plugging it in to some of our regular everyday expenses. So something to think about. And lastly, the community assistance program funds previously have been utilized for most often insurance, because our insurance bill is about $100,000 annually. In FY23, we did allocate $10,000 towards Jackaloff Bay Dock for necessary repairs. We have used some of the funding towards water and sewer insurance, as well as some of the other funds insurance. And that in FY25, we are looking at a net effect right now of $54,911. So there is a little bit of wiggle room in there, but it's not enough to cover all of the cap. We are being told annually when the state legislature starts talking about removing this program that we need to not depend on it. A lot of other communities are utilizing it for capital improvement projects because it makes a difference. It has an impact, but they don't depend on it for a revenue replacement. So it's just something as we work through water and sewer and we continue to work through this budget. If there are other ways you guys would like to see the cap funds utilized, knowing that a portion of it is revenue replacement. And right now it's all in there, which is why we have that net effect. But I know at the last work session, you guys mentioned a community economic development position. That would impact that net effect. The community assistance could go towards it. I mean, we can look at a couple different things. So keep your brain percolating on that. I'm going to turn it over to Clerk Diamond. She did some research on water and sewer utility rates throughout the state. And then Finance Officer Yeager has a presentation on different rate combinations. And then if we have time, we can go back to it, or we can talk about it further at the May 7th meeting.
Okay, so
on 23 of your packet, you'll see a memo that just summary of the comparison spreadsheet behind it. And I was asked at the last meeting to look for more appropriate communities to make comparisons with, as well as to look into subsidies to support the water and sewer system. So I reached out to our local government specialist through DCRA, Ms. Rebecca Ryan, And her and I worked on a spreadsheet, which you'll find on the following page 24. It was really hard to find a water and sewer thing that didn't also have a major served by a cruise ship port. So the spreadsheet is based pretty much on population, and communities that do not have cruise ship ports are off the road system. Quite a few of these are subsidized and don't pay for themselves with user fees. And in there, the spreadsheet, if you look on page 24, you'll see there's a note section that will say kind of subsidized by the borough or the sewer revenues, as well as what their local generated revenue budget is. And the last part of that is some of the subsidies that we were asked to look into were gaming revenues as well to help support the water and sewer system. So the last column of there is the gaming revenues by those communities. And what they found was that most of it was pull tabs or bingo. Bingo did not really turn a profit. It was more for the social experience of being there. The pull tabs did provide a profit, but it's hard to tell from their budgets how much of that is going towards the water and sewer versus just to their general fund. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on those. Oh, the last part of that is DCRA did say that suggested that we do a rate study where they can have one of their local government specialists come down free of charge to do a rate study. And that might be a good suggestion before we start, considering redoing our rates. And if the council has any input on that, they can come down and do that. It will be a little bit of staff time for us just to coordinate with that person coming down. But
what would a rate study entail? Any idea? Did you guys talk about that at all? I mean, is that, are we just figuring out that the actual cost of, per person, or, I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out. When we say rate study, what does that mean exactly?
we didn't discuss in details. It would involve one of their staff coming down and going through our financial records and coming up with what our actual costs and estimates were. It wouldn't cost anything for us to have that person come down. It would just be the staff time for us to work with that person. And I don't know if City Manager Giegel, were you around for the previous rate study?
The last official rate study was done in 2008, and it was done as a requirement as part of the water and sewer improvement project that happened then, that was beginning then. And I think we are overdue. That's something that we will have to do with these upcoming projects through VSW anyways. I believe VSW can help with that, but in speaking with them, it's not something they're as hands-on with as they used to be. So this might be a good opportunity, depending on what DCRA can provide. It would be too late to impact this coming year. So you could, or at least initially. So that, with knowing that, the options, you could hold steady and then see what comes out of the rate study and see if you want to make changes. And, or if you have shifts that right now, as we speak with Finance Officer Yeager, that you want to see implemented now, and then how it coincides with the rate study moving forward. It's not going to meet the deadline for this year's budget, but we could do an adjustment later.
Right. Well, it would be for both water and sewer. It doesn't hurt that your project's coming down the pipe. I'm going to say it's expensive to have water and sewer in a small town, right? For this kind of infrastructure for the small population that we have. So
I think it could also be important just to throw out there that we did have, I believe it's DCRA, I'll have to double check which division it is, that they do an annual look at what the community burden is. And FY21, they constituted us as a high burden community. And then as of FY23, they had shifted that to low burden. And Officer Yeager said, why? Like, what is the difference there? So it might be good just to have them in person here to evaluate that and look at what figures they're looking at and why and what that change would be. Because I haven't had a chance to reach out and address that yet, but that didn't really make sense to either of us.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Okay, anyone have any additional questions or comments on the comparison here? I just noticed other than the rates are all over the board here, like we've seen in the past when we started talking about rates in other communities. And then a number of these are obviously subsidized by a number of different things. So I see the boroughs are out there on a number of these, and then the summer sales tax, they're all over the place. So
Yeah, there's also quite a few communities that have PILT that they put towards their water and sewer.
right, payment in lieu of taxes. Yeah.
PILT, payment in lieu of taxes. It's for
Okay.
federal lands that are with property that are within your community.
Okay.
There's no questions on that. Then we'll see if we can get Officer Yeager to share her screen if she's able. And we'll do a little bit of a deep dive on different ways to present rates for water and sewer for our last discussion.
It's not going to look like much of a deep dive, but I honestly spent quite a bit of time looking at these. And so just to make things simpler, all of these are combined rates. I didn't look at water and then sewer. I just lumped everything together. And so just to kind of review, let me just clear that. Just to review a little bit of what we are discussing here. Currently in our commercial rate structure, we have 3 categories: base commercial, small commercial, and large. Base commercial are properties with 1 small commercial service. Generally, there's not a residential component here. For us, what that usually ends up meaning for base commercial is a lot of these buildings are vacant. Some or potentially, like I said, like the gas station would be an example of a base commercial where they're doing one thing there, no one's living there, etc. Small commercial we've defined as 2 small services. This also includes duplexes, community centers, which in this case would be the Sea Otter Center, is in the small commercial category. Residents with small commercial purposes. So this would be bed and breakfast, where someone's living there, whether or not they're in the business district, they would still fall into that category. Dual residences. So again, whether they're in or out of the business district, if they've got 2 living units, they end up paying small commercial, or privately owned commercial docks, which I found interesting because I don't believe we have anyone that falls into that right now. And then large commercial, 3 or more services. And so in our case, these are almost always a residence plus sometimes a rental unit plus some other form of business there. So it's the hardest category to define, I would say, for large commercial. And so this slide is just to basically show you some of the challenges of making any of these forecasts and the variability that we run into. If I look at how many businesses we have in each category in July, it's a very different number than it is, if I look at it in March. Because businesses shift back and forth depending on whether or not they're open. Currently, we have some buildings that have been base commercial because they haven't been operating, and it looks like they're about to become operational again. So some of those will shift to small. And so that's where we get a lot of the variety. And so the FY25 revenue forecast column, that's based on what I think the actual revenue for FY25 is going to be for these categories. Based on, it includes the shifts back and forth. And so a little under 113,000, if we held everything steady, at the higher rates, you can see there's quite a bit of difference, 131,000. So just about $18,000 difference because of the shifts back and forth is what we see for our revenue changes. Does that make sense? Okay, so basically the slide is in there to show you that forecasting is fuzzy because of the shifts back and forth in categories. You know, as businesses close down for the season, you know, they shift categories. You know, we anticipate that, you know, there's some new construction going on that's, you know, going to add to one category. At the same time, obviously, we've got a building being demolished this week that's going to be stepping out because that is, you know, a business that was bringing in revenue for water and sewer that no longer will. Basically, there were 4 scenarios that were requested by the council to look at last time. I ended up combining the first 2. So raising the base commercial by 10% and bringing small and large commercial down to match, and that should read to match each other, not to match base commercial. And then 1 rate for buildings with a single service, i.e. base commercial, and 1 rate for multiple. So these were combined, and all I ended up doing was basically the first one, because the second one was effectively the same thing. It was creating 1 rate for a single service and 1 rate for multiple services. It was just left a little bit arbitrary as to what those rates would be. And so because I didn't have anything firm to pin them to, I basically just went with the first scenario. And then I also was requested to put all large businesses at the small rate. And so this was, again, similar, where there'd be a base rate and then kind of an other, except in this one, we had a designated target for what that other would be, and then a flat rate. And I did multiple iterations of that. So by increasing the base rate by 10% and then merging small and large, the first one I looked at only traditional businesses. So I was not including, with kind of where you see the reddish type there, not including the governments, nonprofits, and so on. I was only looking at actual commercial for-profit businesses, and then following the code where residents would count as a service. And so basically homes where they've got a rental unit or homes where they've got a Airbnb would fall into the other commercial category. And so the base commercial a rate of increase of 10% over the proposed FY25 of 144.94 brings them to 159.43. And then basically I said, okay, what are all the other commercial businesses that are out there? How many do we have? What's my forecasted revenue for FY25? And what do I need that other commercial rate to be in order to make that same forecasted revenue? And so that's where I got the rate of 194.03. And then just to cover all the scenarios, I also did that same thing, except I brought in all the governmental and nonprofit units into that. So same thing where the base commercial is at 10%, bring in everyone else who is not base commercial and not residential. And what's that revenue, and divide it out across, and that came up with a higher rate of 271.41. The net effect, of course, is 0 because I already had my target of what the revenue was that I was shooting for. It was just a question of what rate do I need to have to get there. So you can see this has the 10% increase on base commercial. Small commercial would be very little effect. It'd be a 1% increase under the first scenario with nonprofits only. Large commercial was a pretty significant decrease of 43%. If we brought in all non-residential, again, 10% increase to the base, it'd be a 29.4% increase to small commercial and a 20.4 decrease to large commercial. So I hope my color coding is making sense there.
I can't see it. Yeah,
Sorry.
because of the glare.
Okay. Yeah, so basically the curtains might help there. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So on the right-hand side, you can see the current FY25 rates are in blue. And then the percentages shown in red tie to the topic heading in red, and then the percentage change in green ties to the topic heading in green, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I just, again, just trying to explore all our options. I ran the same scenario, except this time I did not consider the residents a service. And so that took them, basically that moved places that are, people are living in their homes and then they have a B&B, or they have, maybe a rental unit, that moved them into base commercial. And so that increased the number paying base commercial, and it increased the burden on the others. So you can see there again, when under that, we'd have still the same effect on base commercial. Small commercial would go up by 16.2. Large commercial would drop to just about 33%. And then again, if we do that same thing, but pull the nonprofit and government units into there, then we see a small commercial would increase by 48%. Large commercial would also increase by 7.5. And then the next scenario we looked at was holding the base rate the same, but moving all the large businesses to small. And so this one is not revenue neutral, because it's moving everyone to a set rate rather than figuring out, what the revenue target is. So obviously no effect on the base commercial, small commercial, obviously would hold the same. So the only effect would be on the large commercial, and the bottom line for the city would be a net loss of $5,117.69 approximately, is what we'd be looking at if we did that. Again, all fuzzy because people are different categories at different times of year.
Mayor Campbell.
Yep, go ahead, Judge. Turn your mic on.
Sorry. The second option there, I'm just wondering if that wouldn't be more palatable for the community. You know what I mean? In other words, it's not going to affect our residents as much. And there's a benefit for the businesses as well, just not as much. I'm just wondering if that isn't, to me, it seems like a better option.
You're saying the second. Is it,
I think it would be more palatable to the community itself as a whole. I know it still doesn't take as much off the businesses, but I don't know.
so this one the base ends up being 159, and then the other commercial, which is a combination of small and large, becomes 228. Is that okay? I gotcha.
So you're either one or the other, one service or you're more.
Yep. Yeah, let's listen to the others here.
Okay, so let's see. So I think we basically already covered this one. And then the other option that I was asked to look at was a flat rate. And we looked at this a little bit last time around. This is a little bit deeper dive into it. And so this is just some basic kind of background information. So again, the base, small and large commercial, we anticipate under the current system, revenue from those in FY23 will be just under $73,000. Nonprofits and government is just over $42,000. And our residents currently just under 199 is what we anticipate receiving. So I think the total is about $330,000 altogether. So base rate option one, if we just do a base or flat rate for all base, small and large, leave the other customer types out of that, that rate would end up 183.83. So a 21% increase is what our folks who are base commercials would see. Small commercial, 4% decrease, and large commercial, an 85% decrease. So pretty significant for large. relatively small change for small, but again, a pretty significant increase for the base commercial. And again, a lot of our base commercials are buildings that are not really operational at the time.
Yeah, just, I mean, thinking out, I guess anyone can chime in here at any time. I mean, I'm probably not a big fan of that one. It doesn't seem overly fair. I mean, I think my intent was when we started talking about this is, yeah, it's kind of screwed up because, I mean, when you've got the large commercial that includes, you know, triplexes and fourplexes, which are primarily residential. I get it that they're a commercial, consider a commercial operation, but they're from a use standpoint, I mean, that's way massive more of a use than most other businesses that are in operation in town. Say you take the gas station, or you take the grocery store, or you even take the hotel or the bar. I mean, short of just washing dishes, which is not a small, you know, in its peak, it can be, it can be big on certain days, but yeah, other than the peak summer months, there is nothing going on at any of these places in terms of actual usage compared to residential. I'm not saying we, I don't have all the answer here, but also the way we figure this seems overly complex. With the city having to, number one, people and ask them if they change or just do nothing, or listen to people complain all the time that the rates are when not, and if because they failed that they made something like that. It just seems like a lot of work for our current system. I mean, I think there's a couple of these that you're probably onto something. I mean, but again, yeah.
That's why I made the comment here is I don't have a problem in our fair share. But it is pretty complicated, which in turn. That.
So let's talk about an example, and then I'll get to you. For example, okay. Gas station added an espresso and a little food thing, right? So now are they staying under that, or are we going to penalize them for wanting to do one more small thing in their business? No different than any other building here. I mean, if, I open my gift shop in the summer, that takes me from, 2 services to 3 services. And I don't have a bathroom. I don't have a sink. I don't have nothing. It's the same building. There's not 1 inch of increased anything coming at just because I'm doing something else to help pay my bills. And then there's lots of scenarios here like that, right? So that's my motivation behind this. That's my only thought is I don't want to continue to penalize people for trying to ultimately bring in, more revenue and more sales tax. So Jen, you got your hand up?
Yeah. So, okay. So looking at this slide, this option number 1. So you're saying flat rate 183 is everyone. Gas station, liquor store, hotel, everyone's all the same.
Yes, that would be correct.
And then there's no, so what, but there's a base. Oh, I see. This is a change from the base. So there would be no winter, summer. We don't care what you're doing. You're a business, whether you're open or closed, you're 183 a month.
Correct.
Okay. From your standpoint of billing, love it. I love it. You don't have to figure out what anybody's doing. It's not your problem whether they're open or closed. You don't have to keep track of that. And nothing is ever going to be fair. Never, as far as usage. Because it'll go back to the homes. It's not fair. No one told me to have 3 kids, but I did. And they take baths all the time. I use a lot of water. But then you got my neighbor who's a single person who's here a couple months out of the year, and they pay the same thing and probably never use any water. Nobody told them to not do, I'm not telling them to move in and move your family in and have a bunch of kids and use all this water, but we're paying the same. I think it should kind of work the same way. No one's telling you what kind of business to run. You have a business, here's your fee. We can't keep track of your water. This is the easiest way to go, for sure. I understand that it's not fair, but it's never going to be fair. None of the rates are going to be fair unless we have meters, and we know that that's not going to happen. I think to simplify things, I like it. I know you have other options. I'm trying to pay attention as I'm trying to do other things, but I like the simplicity is what I'm getting at.
I think I agree with you. I agree with you, but I think going back to like John's comment and looking at, I don't think we'll solve it tonight, but I think if we put our heads together here and do a little more thinking at that, I mean, coming off of, the 330 large, coming off of 340 going to 180 for a large bit. I mean, that's pretty substantial, right? Maybe there is the hybrid, flat rate, but there's just two options going back to kind of that second slide you had, Jan. And there's just, it is what it is year round, it makes sense. There's no, you're in it, if you're doing this, you're at the smaller one. And as soon as you get going, you're at the larger one, but now we've evened them out a little bit, substantially more.
This here would have a huge impact on her workload.
Oh yeah, no, there's no question.
I mean, how many times a month does somebody come in and interrupt you like me over your water bill? And the confusion, and I don't know.
Yeah,
I think you're probably on something there.
Honestly, it actually doesn't happen that often. And I would say my honest reaction after my first go around of this, where I was looking at all the other cities and all their rate schedules and so on, I was so grateful for ours because it was so much simpler than anything else I had seen. So yeah, and because we're a relatively small community, we know each other, we know kind of what's happening. People know that they can reach out, and so it honestly is not a great burden for just shifting between the three.
And you have a few more slides, right, Jan?
For just our traditional commercial. And if we have a flat rate, it's all non-residential, because of course we do have other places, other things that are non-residential that are not falling into those categories, or non-commercial, nonprofit, government, etc. And so that had a because this is residential, there's no effect there. It would be actually a 41% increase to the base, 22% increase to small commercial, and then a 59% decrease to large commercial. We don't have a lot of governmental and nonprofit customers. There's only about 6, but they do. Some of them do pay rather substantial water bills, or water and sewer. And then I also looked at what if we just had one flat rate across the board and pulled our residents into it. And because we have, the residential is proportionally so many more customers, that's why it has such a strong effect. And so that rate would end up being about a little under $131 a month. For residents, this would be a 26% increase. And that's above the FY25, not over FY24. Small commercial, a 47% decrease, and large commercial, 161% decrease. So pretty significant. And then I also thought it'd be interesting just to look at, who our residents are. We kind of know who our businesses are, because we're so small, but we don't have necessarily a good handle on who the residents are. And so I looked at that as well, just out of curiosity. And it definitely demonstrated that, as we know, we are kind of an aging community. 48% are 60 or older. We're also a young community, 20% under 19. And then kind of the middle age working years 20 to 59 is only 32% of the population, which I found rather eye-opening personally. And then I also looked at, what is an average household size? And in Seldovia, again, this is going to be largely because we are an older population. Household size was 2.1, family size 2.8. Our occupancy rate, I also found very interesting that 47% was our occupancy rate year round. This doesn't really affect water and sewer for such because residents pay the same whether they're in the building or not. But I just thought it was interesting. And then just to kind of get an idea of economics, I looked at what is our percentage of people that participate in Medicaid, and it came back to 26%. So that's basically people that are, I believe it's 150% of the poverty rate or below. And so then, and I apologize that the poverty level distribution is very hard to read with all those colors. But you can see that it's pretty well distributed. And of course, you have to pick a household size in order to figure out what the poverty rate is. And so because the average household size was 2.1, I just went with a household of 2 people. So those numbers are a little bit arbitrary, obviously, because I had to hold something constant. And so that's what I did, was hold the household size constant. But again, the basic take home from that is there's a pretty wide distribution of income levels. And then I also just looked at, another way to see what households look like. These obviously will not add up to 100 because people can fall into more than one category, but 61.7% of our homes had someone in them 60 years or older. 47.3% had someone 65 or older. 18% 65 or older living alone. 17% was someone under 18. So it's just kind of a little bit of who Seldovia is. Because like I said, I thought that's something we should factor into the discussion as we look at water and sewer rates, and we have a good handle on the businesses, but not necessarily the households.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks. Thanks, Jan. Appreciate that.
I'm sorry, it's not very much.
Well, any additional thoughts, comments from anyone?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, a lot of information, and this is something we're going to go back over, I presume. Good data. Thank you, Jan. I'm not really in favor of raising that rate to the residents, the homeowners. But I think there's work that can be done about evening up a little bit of the rates. I think, anyhow, this is something that's come back to us. Will come back to us a couple of more times. Is that correct, City Manager?
We're coming down.
You're cutting out. And also, again,
May
we cut
7th.
presentation. May
Yeah,
7th.
so we can have a May 7th meeting. We can even have a May 13th. The budget needs to be passed by the end of May. So depending on how many times more you guys want to meet, we'll have to schedule in some additional work sessions or special meetings. We can do it. But May 7th is kind of the final go at it. May 13th for any last minute catch ups. And then other than that, we start scheduling extra meetings.
Right. Yeah, so looking at the water and sewer rates again, is a big transition, a big load to take on. And I was glad to hear that, Jan, you felt what we have going is workable for an employee in your end, that people aren't coming in and bugging you too much about the rates anymore like they used to back when Jen was there. That's a good thing. I think, as everyone said earlier, that this is a tough topic to deal with. And it's tough to try to make it fair for everyone because you probably can't do that. But so I think we need a little bit more conversation, but I'm pretty sure that most of the residents in town would look not so happily on looking that their rates are going to go up to 130 or whatever it was, and all the other rates in town were going down. I don't think that's a good support that we want to put across. That's it for now. Thanks.
we didn't get that presentation, right? Would you guys be able to email that out to us, and that way we can noodle on that between now and next meeting? And I think, and I think obviously by the May 7th meeting, we need to have, I'd say that's pretty much, unless something compelling comes out of that meeting, I'd say we need to have our final thoughts gathered on what we want to do on that May 7th meeting. This is good information, and if, again, everyone on the council can noodle on their own numbers, using that as a guideline. But I think there's something workable here for sure that could be meaningful for everyone. So.
Yes, I apologize for the short timeline.
No,
We can do
that's fine.
that, and then bring it back at May 7th. Will work.
Okay.
Is there anything else you guys would like to see at the May 7th meeting?
What else do you have scheduled on that one?
I was
now?
just going to bring back the final fee schedule and budget, with the exception of the water and sewer. And then if we want, we can just follow up with the last discussion on tonight's meeting, which is that cap and ARPA, if you guys have any ideas on what you want to do with that. Otherwise, that can be May 7th as well. And I think, unless there's something you guys that I've missed, I think that'll kind of
So
wrap us up for this year.
On the ARPA, then, I think I didn't hear any disagreement from anyone that I think I'm pretty clear that the 14 grand, I'd like to see that, and as the council used to go ahead and take care of our shortfall for senior meals. I think that's good. That leaves us with about 9,000 remaining.
Mhm.
I don't, unless,
Yeah.
go ahead. If anyone's got any comments on what they might.
The first question I have is for Heidi. It's only $10,000 where you need it. And then the next question is, we're fixing the sewer repair down here. I realize you're working on a loan there, but when's our matching funds for Jackaloff going to have to come into play? And I'm wondering if we couldn't use that first, leave the other funds in the Jackaloff fund, in case we run into, I'm just worried about running into an issue before the end of the year.
Valid point. And with that, what we can do is we can use it as we need it and just put it towards revenue replacement. I mean, unless there's something specific you guys want to go towards, it will help offset the cost
Just
of
trying
everything
to
else.
not be nitpicky about it and where are we really going to need it?
Yeah, and that probably makes sense. If we allocate it for revenue replacement, then you can pretty much use it where we have the shortfall, or if there's something that comes up that we need to use it for.
Yep, like we did for FY23 and the audit for FY24. That the FY22 audit that expanded into FY24. So we can use it like that and just.
And now, are we sure that budget, the 14, is going to get us across the finish line then for senior meals, or do we want to safeguard that, or what's the thought on that? Because I don't want to come up short again.
That's an excellent question, and I can send it over to Finance Officer Yeager. One thing that she's been really after, or that we would love to see, is just a small increase in wages for those positions, because they haven't seen it since 2022, and that was only a 2.5%.
Yeah, and I know we just talked a little bit about that, that group is probably a little under where they should be, and it's been tough to get people into those positions.
Yeah, I would say it's, the 14 will definitely not be too much. I don't think we'll end up with any extra. It's very difficult to know, what that budget's going to look like, partially because we are seeing participation, for the program, it's a financial impact. We can also newly, we can volunteer a lot of our groceries over for us, and so that's been saving us on freight costs. But
Oh, wow, okay.
yeah, it's been very generous. But we just don't have a good handle on what that impact is yet. And then, of course, there's the unknowns of some of the other loans or some of the other grants that we're hoping to pursue. So it is difficult to say at this point exactly what that bottom line is going to look like.
Okay.
We can budget. Budget. With that 23, expend it all. Well, we have to expend it, but the hope is we budget high enough for what we need. Revenues, we budget a little bit lower so that we're not over budgeting, and then they shake out in the end and our revenues exceed our expenditures and we aren't blowing our budget.
So what would it take then to, I mean, I have no problem with that. I mean, some of that, or if it was even all of that, whatever we had to do. I mean, if it, again, these are people that live here and work here and depend, that money goes right back into the community. They're going to spend a good chunk of that right back in the community. So what goes around comes around, right? And that's, again, in this day and age, we're trying to slowly get everyone up to a decent living wage, in these these times of high cost on everything. So I'm not opposed to doing, taking some or all of that if you have to utilize that for a salaries increase. We have 2 or 3 people that paid in that. Or is there?
So there's a cook and an assistant cook. And who's in either one of those slots can change with the seasons and so on. But 2 at any given time. And then we have
Okay, so there's always 2, might be more than 2 people, but it's always two positions that
Right.
you're budgeted for. Okay.
And then even with that, I don't think we would take all of it. So it's like the one-time water and sewer revenue replacement, of course, numbers would change depending on or towards if you guys want to see that marketing position, knowing that your net effect is 52, looking at probably 40 for a new position, 8,000 of this toward to see how it goes here, and then reevaluate from there, or as Councilmember Kennedy said, we just
I'm sorry, but you're cutting out and underwater. Can't hear a word you're saying.
So if we 9,000 additional for salary increases for senior meals, I don't think it would take all of it. There are some other scenarios that could be considered. Water and sewer revenue replacement, incentive program for FY20, like we did in FY 2020, and keeping in mind that that wouldn't be implemented until next year. So with the December deadline, maybe that's not a good fit, or maybe we are using it as replacement somewhere else so that we can utilize the 7,500 next summer, or we just wait and see how the rates are going to shift anyways, knowing that there could be some change. So maybe this is not the right time to consider that, but something to keep in the back pocket. And we just, as Councilmember Kennedy said, hold and use those funds as we need it.
And the funds you're talking about are the remaining 9,000 or so?
Yeah, it'd probably be about 7,500.
Okay.
Yeah, I was
Seven.
just suggested that they sit on them until we get to the end of the actual calendar year.
Yeah, so yeah, the bulk of it first year replacement, and then you guys will be able to. I think there must be an objection to that. I think that's probably the safest way to go. Yep. Hang on, we got an airplane going overhead here. Yeah, any objections to that from anyone on the line then? Just the bulk of that
Could you repeat it as again, you're underwater? Real quickly, could you repeat it?
Suggesting that they just sit on the $9,000 until we get closer to the end of the calendar year and the required use of it, and make sure that we don't have something else come up. I was looking at the work for tonight later on, and that that pumping station, the estimate for it is double what we expected it to be. And I'm wondering, I asked Heidi when the matching funds for the Jackalope dock when we were going to have to actually come up with the money for that. I'm just concerned about a couple of those things, and any input would be appreciated.
Mayor, I can answer that last one. I mean, I can answer them both, but the last one, that's an excellent point because we are already starting our work with Moffett and Nickel. It's kind of cart behind the horse because we're waiting on MARED to give us feedback on the scope of services that Moffett and Nickel provided. However, they happened to be in the area last week, so they came into the community and performed an initial survey of the area out on the dock. So they are starting work and we will start seeing bills from them.
Okay, sounds good.
Mr. Mayor. Yep, I'm in favor of, as Councilmember Kennedy said, let's just take that money and sit on it. And if anything, I would rather that it get used for existing programs that we have. So just to put it in savings that we can use as time goes on, but first fulfill what we need to with the senior meals program. I'm in favor of that. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else? Well, I supposed to go to public too, to see if it.
One more thing, running that community assistance program. I was going to present a resolution at the next meeting allocating that $75,047 that's anticipated to the general fund to offset the cover of insurance, unless there's some other place you guys would like to see it. That's what we've done previously. We probably need about 18,000 of it to do that. And we will have a net effect on the budget we're anticipating. So we could use we know that we are coming out of a deficit and we would like to start working towards some more capital improvements. Eventually, net effect, once we can cover these assigned, really what it's going to do is it goes into the net effect and then it goes into capital overlay because we have these major maintenance and repair funds and other funds that are sitting without the actual funds to cover them. So it will shift and eventually become capital for fund for capital projects, unless there's some other project or place that you want to see it. That seems to have worked well for us historically, but throwing that out there before the resolution is presented, if you guys had any other ideas of things, smaller things that you want to see done in the next year with those funds, we could do that. I know that there was a discussion about the community and development economic coordinator. That could be part of it if you guys are serious and you really want to look at it in the next year. I think you could afford it and you could budget for it, but it's going to be tight and you're not making as much as those of that difference. So that's one thing to outweigh is, do you want to bring on a person, see what grants and things that they can bring in, that'd be part of their task, or do you want to hold steady for this year, that coming year, and then see where we're at and evaluate again at the end of FY25?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would go for the latter. I'm not in the position or realm that I think taking on a new position for the city is something we want to do. I think that's a discussion item that we need to plan out a little bit more. When we were originally talking about it, I was thinking that it would be Chamber of Commerce and somehow the city could be in kind. I was not thinking the city was going to fund the position. So to me, that's a conversation that we need to have within the community at another meeting. So I prefer that we use the money that we have to cover in areas that we've in the past. It seems like it's worked in that area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vivian. Anyone else? Thoughts, comments? Yeah, I think just listen to a little bit of the feedback there. It probably makes sense to do exactly that. Just go ahead and keep it in there for revenue replacement then. Yep. And then yeah, we'll just figure it out when the time
I'm
comes. We're
I'm good
see
with
how
that as
everything-
well.
Yeah, see how everything, where we end up with the final budgets.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is coming. I can see it. It's down the horizon, but we're just not quite there yet. And capital overlay, and that's a significant need for the community, especially as Councilmember Kennedy said with these upgrades. So
Yeah, we're on the right track right now with, funds, so I don't want to see us get derailed. You know, we're moving in the right direction, so. All right, let's see, anyone from the public that wishes to comment on any of these topics tonight?
We do not have anybody that's previously signed up, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
And just for the council members' reference, I did email out that presentation from
Awesome.
Finance Officer Yeager, and it
Awesome.
should be up on the homepage of the
Okay.
website as well. So as
sounds
soon
good.
as
It's on the website also.
trying to, apparently my computer is the problem. So during the intermission, I will
Okay,
put it on there.
sounds good.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Okay, any other, let's see, that's everything tonight on the agenda for the work session. Any other final closing comments before we adjourn? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn. That gives us about 15 minutes for everyone to take a little break before the regular meeting at 6 o'clock. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
We're adjourned.